Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We got a special guest today from Yes Every Kid, Andrew Clark. How's it going?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Got the Summer Moon coffee. What could be better?
Yeah, it's delicious.
Are you allowed to do that as a Black Rifle refugee?
Well, until they're opening a place here in Austin soon, actually. But until they do, there's not much else I can do. I did make espresso at my house with Black Rifle this morning, but there's no brick and mortar here in Austin yet, so they got to get their shit together.
Happens.
Yeah, so let's get into your story a little bit. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Phoenix, and then I became a reverse snowbird. So my parents got divorced, and my mother ended up in Spokane, Washington, and my father stayed in Phoenix. So when it was hotter than hell, I was in Phoenix, and when it was freezing cold, I was in Spokane.
It seems like you got that mixed up.
Yeah, I would not recommend doing it that way. I think the other way is generally preferable.
Yeah. What was it like growing? I don't know if I know anybody that actually grew up in Phoenix.
I think Phoenix is the greatest place on earth. I'm an unapologetic homer.
Yeah. Spokane is something.
Yeah, you have Vietnam, you got Spokompton. There's just some places that have a special character in the country.
Yeah, there definitely are. So what was your career like? Because then we'll get into the thing you're doing now, but what were you doing before that?
Yeah, so I came out of high school. I grew up in a very religious household, a very strict Mormon household. I went on a mission in North Carolina, came back from that, and started working in mergers and acquisitions for a large trucking firm, which was awesome until the economy tanked. And then from that, I just started getting involved in politics, running state legislative races, and that eventually progressed into doing congressional and gubernatorial work. And from that, I got involved into lobbying and advocacy. And so I've just kind of done a little bit of everything in the broader empire that we now call Stand Together, from software development to lobbying Congress on Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid, those kinds of things, to food trucks, to now doing education.
What brought you into education?
Yeah, I was running our operations in Arizona for a group called Americans for Prosperity, and there was an increasing fight over education in the state, which makes sense because education is a huge portion of state budgets. And I hadn't really done much on education before, and just did what any Politico would do. I started polling it to figure out what the heck people were talking about, what the debate was over. And what became very clear to me in the polling was you have two partisan points of view that nobody wanted. So the Democrats you could generally frame up as saying we just need more money and everything will be awesome, and the Republicans were just saying we just need to privatize everything and everything will be awesome.
Sure.
And the public was kind of giving a middle finger to both. And I just found that really odd. Like, why would you have these giant fights, these multi-billion-dollar fights over something nobody wanted? And I just thought, man, I think there's an opportunity to come in and do some lobbying and advocacy and push for an agenda that people see value in, give them things that they actually want. And that was kind of what eventually led to me finding some other education partners and creating Yes Every Kid.
Sure. Yeah, I've had Corey DeAngelis on the show a couple times. And it's the argument against is really funny to me because people say investing in schools outside of publicly controlled ones will kill publicly controlled ones. And it's funny because they never seem to go the next step to ask why that's the case. Why would it be the case? If you have an elite public education system, for example, my oldest stepkid goes to a school that's like the fourth ranked school in the country for elementary schools. And it's public. It's a public school. But the difference is it's in a nice area and the parents raise a couple $100,000 a year for the school, right? But most public schools suck, and it's because if the government gets something wrong, they just pour more money into it. You know what I mean? There's no like nobody gets fired programs don't change. You're just like, oh, it's a funding issue. Everybody thinks it's a funding issue. It's the same with the VA. The VA, they keep pouring money into it, and it's just incompetence after incompetence. Even the current VA is completely incompetent. That's the way it is. But to answer the question, why would a second option be at the detriment of the first option? Is because the first option sucks. Now you've got the opportunity to improve it. That's your choice, right, in a market. But people choose not to do that.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty good summation of the situation we're in. People are telling on themselves, right? They're saying if it's not compulsive, if we don't force you to do it, people won't do it. That should probably be a hint.
Yeah, you would think so, but not so much. It's odd to me that people just accept that primary education is the job of the government. That's a very odd thing, and it's not just the left that thinks that way. The right thinks that way as well.
Do, and I know you're a big fan of history. I think part of this is just we're so ingrained as Americans into this idea of education as a pathway to success. You know, all the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson started a lot of one-room schoolhouses. Benjamin Franklin had the Junto, which created public libraries and property tax for the first time, and a system of public schools. And so, for the first 100 years, we had a system of voluntary public schooling. You didn't have to go, but we made it available to a lot of kids, and a lot of kids took advantage of it. But as we got into the progressive era, we flipped a switch where you've got Carnegie and Rockefeller and Horace Mann and all these guys who are making a very different argument, which is not that we should help people or voluntarily help people, but it's that, as Horace Mann would say, people are empty vessels. Rockefeller and Carnegie said less charitable things about humans. Basically, that they were incapable and inept, and we just needed to find the few smart ones in the crew and get everybody else to be compliance machines. And they flipped a switch from a voluntary system to a compulsive one. And Americans have never liked being told what to do. They've never liked being compelled, but something about education uniquely has allowed them to overcome public sentiment and hang on to it. And both parties seem to find political benefit in continuing to be paternal that way. And so I think that's a lot of what we're up against, is trying to remind people like, hey, kids are your responsibility as a parent. It's your job to educate your kid. That's not the government's role, and we need to turn that back. And school choice is one mechanism of many to try to get back to the culture of personal responsibility I think we all want.
Yeah, it's wild to me that to me the 20th and 21st centuries in the Western world are marked by abdication of responsibility, whether it be the Congress abdicating their legislative functions to the executive or to the courts, which is pretty common. That's probably in politics. That's the primary issue we have. Frankly, it's not all the money and stuff. Certainly, that stuff doesn't help. But Congress did this on purpose to make sure that they couldn't be held accountable for anything. That's what allows for them to take money from people to do shit that we don't want them to do. Otherwise, they would be one term, and that would be it. You know what I mean? This is how it's been set up. And then, to have parents do this as well, obviously is not great. And you can have the debate of is politics downstream of culture? Did we start abdicating our responsibilities in the boomer period, which seems to be the case, and then Congress followed suit? Yeah, I would think so, right? So if you want to adjust American political life, adjust your own fucking life first. How about that? Stop waiting for somebody to do the work for you and get out there and do it yourself. That's what I would recommend.
Support that. I mean, I know you said a few times that you have libertarian inklings, but I would say like even in libertarianism, where the party itself and the people involved proclaim themselves to be these ardent champions of liberty and freedom, it's when you see them express it, they're often blue-haired hippies like throwing things everywhere and being absolute psychopaths, and you're like, hey, Inherent to the ideas of liberty are the ideas of personal responsibility and accountability to yourself and everybody around you in your community. And it's just really easy to forget the latter half of that or not live it out in practice. And, that's where you get John Adams saying, like, this country was built for immoral
Mm.
people. I think that's what he meant is like, freedom's only going to be as good as you as an individual can take responsibility for that freedom and act on it. And so, yeah, if we're going to change the country, that's not going to come from some hall or some congressional decision. That's going to come from all of us in our own individual lives making better decisions.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, I think everything kind of springs forward from that. You set the tone. We get this idea that because, and it's maybe it's programmed into us biologically that power flows from top to bottom, but we intentionally created a system that doesn't do that, and you can see it. It's one thing to say that we're a government of, for, and by the people, but we can actually bear it out. You can see it. You could point out where people in the voting class get lazy, and the upper class, if you want to call them that, politically speaking, takes advantage of it every single time. So if you don't need any more proof that power flows from the people. That's the most obvious proof. We don't have divine right of kings here. That shit's over with. So people feel hopeless and powerless all the time, and I'm like, it's just not true. It's simply not true. The most resounding effort that I've heard in modern political history is twofold. One was, and it goes in both directions. One was accepting all the COVID bullshit. I think something like 85 or 90% of Americans got vaccinated with an experimental vaccine. That shit's wild to me. I mean, 50% of the country votes Republican. They still did it. And they accepted the lockdowns, although at some point people started kind of challenging that stuff. But on the other end of it, once the Biden administration tried to stand up this disinformation governance board, which is just thought police, everybody was like, nah, fuck, we're not fucking doing that. And I struggle with that because it's so obvious that just collectively saying no to something has so much power in our culture today, because power indeed does flow from the bottom up here, whether you want to admit it or not. It definitely does. So when I see a very obvious example of everybody just saying no, and then I see on another case, let's say like the SAVE Act has 85% support in this country, bipartisan support, and you can't get it done. That to me is something that mentally I just can't handle it. You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense to me. And people are like, oh, nothing will ever get done. It's like, well, if you say that, then you'll be right. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, there's a bunch of famous experiments where they'll put five people in a room, and four of the participants will be staff, and only the one person's the unsuspecting victim. And what they'll do is they'll change the order of the chair, and then they'll get the staff to tell a lie, a known lie, and they want to see if the participant will go along with the lie or not. And what they found is if the participant's in that fifth chair and the first four people lie, almost every time the fifth participant will just go along with it. But as long as somebody before the order is willing to tell the truth, it doesn't matter that they're in the minority. Just hearing the truth gives the last person the courage to stand up against that. And if you think about that kind of social phenomena across society, it's one of the reasons the First Amendment, the right to speech, is so powerful. It's not, people misconstrue the First Amendment as thinking the government has the rights to speech and hands it over to us. It's the opposite of that, right? We have the right to say what we want. We hold those rights. It's the government's job actually to protect our rights to say what we want, and they have to, because we have to be able to say things that are unpopular. we have to have the tolerance to hear things that are odious, untrue, even, in order for people to make smart decisions and truth to rise out of it. And so that's where, as a country, I think we've got to be really smart and grounded in principles, and then actually able to apply them.
Yeah, that's certainly to your early point. Andrew Jackson said one man with courage makes a majority, and that test proves it again, right? It's like a sociological test to prove that maxim is indeed true. Psychology is contagious, and I think the founders, you mentioned John Adams saying that this Constitution is written for righteous and moral people. James Madison, I guess, if you want to call that the light side, the dark side of it is James Madison saying that men are not angels. If they were, we would not need government, right? Our founders were realists. They weren't idealists in any sense of the word. As a matter of fact, when the bulk of this writing came out that we always attribute our culture to, it was after the period of the Articles of Confederation in a large way, after they had tried libertarianism and were like, oh, this is fucking stupid. We can't do this. Libertarianism as an anchor point to pull you in the direction of making sure everybody is not consuming too much power is a good complementary thing. But as far as like a standalone ideology, it just doesn't work. We literally tried it. I'm sorry. I can't listen to people who say, communism's been tried and it just sucks, and then say we should elect a libertarian for president. Like, just shut the fuck up, man. It doesn't make any sense. But anyways, to the other point, yeah, just like it's very obvious that there is a lot of power in the bottom part of this country, and not in a tyranny of the minority kind of way, but just in like being vocal because these people care about, I guess, maintaining their presence. That's what politicians mostly care about because they're fucking losers, frankly. No offense, but fuck you. Offense. I hate them. But
You're allowed to hate them. They're a very hateable class
yeah,
of
they are.
humans.
Yeah, it's funny because this is one of the other ways that you can tell that Congress as a body, both houses have abdicated their power, and the reason why they do it is that Congress itself has a lower approval rating than any individual person in Congress, right? So it's single digits for Congress typically. It's somewhere between 9 and 12% approval rating for Congress typically. You'll struggle to find any member of Congress in either house that's lower than 40 at any given time. Every now and again, somebody, if they do something really dumb or say something really dumb, they'll pop down into the 30s. But for the most part, people stay 40 to 60 in that range. But meanwhile, the entire body is so low, and that's what they want to do. They want to. It's called risk smoothing, right? In the business and risk management, you just smooth the risk out over a broader body, or risk spreading rather. Excuse me. You spread the risk out over a broader body to make it look like nobody is actually responsible for anything. We are in a representative republic. We elected you to do something, right? Based on our Constitution and our common law and legislative law and all that, and you're not doing it, so I need to fire you now. And their excuse is, well, I can't do that. How can I do that? It's like, well, then why the fuck are you there? You know what I mean? And education is probably the place that it's most consistently fucked, I think, right? Because the pool is so large. It's 100 and how many kids are in school right now? 180 million or something like that. You know what I mean?
55 million nationwide.
55 million. That's it, really?
In K-12. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think people don't appreciate, but between immigration rates and falling birth rates, it is down significantly and it's heading down quick.
Wow, that's a lot lower than I would have expected.
Yeah. But if you look in a state, this part of the political problem is you've got a relatively small minority of people that have kids in the home and most people that don't. And so, you're asking everyone to subsidize a benefit that a relatively small people get the benefit from. And that creates all sorts of weird upside down incentives. And it's part of the reason education is such the political football that it is.
Yeah, that's odd to me. But yeah, I think it's the most obvious to see the not corruption per se, but the incompetence is in the American education system. Some of it is corruption. I mean, certainly, if you give the power to train children over to people who want to train them to get their votes in 25 years, you're basically just paying Philip Morris to advertise to your kids. It's Joe Camel, but in political form, right?
Yeah. I mean, I long ago had somebody who just told me, like, never assume malice when incompetence will do. And I think whether it's school districts or Congress, most of the behavior is going to be explained just through pure incentives and people just naturally going after whatever they think's going to give them the greatest benefit. And, when you centralize power in structures that don't have good incentives, you're going to get bad behavior that comes out of it.
Mm.
And so whether that is Congress just kind of doing the go along to get along with all sorts of horrible ideas, or it's a school district, we can go through all sorts of examples, but you're not too far from Houston.
Mm.
The Houston ISD has all sorts of very clear cases of corruption, in my view, where, contractors want to build bigger, nicer schools. They want more money. So they're, of course, going to lobby for people who are going to help them build more buildings. That's, it's people just chasing their self-interest, but in ways that are just not helpful to society as a whole.
Yeah. You've got kids, right? You got a couple, 3 kids?
3 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What, how old are they?
Got 3, 6, and 8.
Oh, wow. So they're getting there. What have you noticed personally? I mean, some of that stuff is, some of the stuff you can see in the crosstabs, right? Some of it you see anecdotally, just sending your kids to school every day.
Yeah, and we've had our oldest in every kind of school under the sun at this point, just because he's a special snowflake
Mm.
who we love. But you can watch some of these incentives play out, right? Like when he was in a public school setting and we had challenges, we'd sit down with the principal and they'd be like, "Wow, yeah, that's really a problem. I hope you can fix that." You're right. And you're like, "Hey, in theory, that's what we're paying you to do. Like, can you help us?"
Mm.
There just wasn't a lot there, which is different than the school setting we have him in now, which is a private school setting. And when we have a problem, which we don't have very often, but when we do, like they are jumping out the window to help in every which way. I don't wish ill will or necessarily have mean things to say about the people in the public system. They just have a different set of trade-offs and incentives they have to juggle with. And so you want to be in a spot where your incentives, which are to help and love and raise your kids, are aligned with the people that are helping you do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I mean, part of this is just the overarching cultural attitude towards it. You know what I mean? Like, what do we mean when we say we're educating our kids? And I think it's something, I think about this a lot, because throughout most of history, and I think this is true for East and West, one of the goals of parenthood is to give my children a better life than I had, right? And better has typically been marked by more resources, more ability, whatever. I don't know that I can give my kids more resources than I had, because I've had a pretty fucking successful life. You know what I mean? Even from when I was a child, it wasn't so great, but you don't even remember that stuff. You know what I mean? As far as like, unless you're in abject poverty, I don't think most people really realize how fucking poor we really were growing up. You know what I mean? Now that I can just do whatever the fuck I want all the time, my parents did not in any way have that capability. But yeah, it's like, I guess you have to shrink the conversation down a little bit and define what you mean by the word better. You know what I mean? Because it's not, we're not on the ascent right now. I don't think we're on the descent. So whether things are cyclical or, I don't know. I've heard these theories like the four stages, of Western civilization that we go through in an 80-year period. Maybe that's true. I don't know. But you could certainly see it in education. You could see like when something, and there's a lot of factors to it too. I think there is quite a few people involved in it who have the elitist worldview, like this is what you should think, and that's the way they want to teach. I think some of it is, Hanlon's razor. They're just incompetent. Some of it is 40-person classroom. You have to narrow down what you can teach because there's not time for discussion or nuance in a situation like that. And our solution to that was to double down on it, which is an odd solution, frankly, right? So a lot of these problems are problems of scalability, and that's a business solution, which is, if you want business to solve something, you don't hand it to the government, frankly. I mean, we've seen what they do when you try to get them to solve something. This current administration, I would probably be fine. If you want to put Scott Bessent in charge of reshaping what fucking American education looks like, I'd be perfectly satisfied with that because the man knows how to do business, right? But, the Department of Education is a fucking joke, and it always has been. It's never been good. Literally, it's not one for 1 year has it ever been good.
Now it's a mess. I'm curious when you think you have had this incredibly successful life. When you think back at all the educational experiences you've had, and I don't mean that in like an institutional setting, but you just think like where did you learn the most that gave you the skills that allowed you to live that life? What moment comes to mind in that?
Definitely not any public education.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I had some great teachers over the years. I remember my history teacher in seventh or eighth grade, Mr. Greer was wonderful. He was just a storyteller, right? So he would take the stories, the history stories, and he would tell us the fucking story like I'm watching a documentary or something. It was the best. He's probably the best teacher I've ever had at the public school level. So that really like got my brain moving. You know what I mean? And that's
Yep.
I think to be an educator, you have to be a communicator. I don't. It's not for everybody. Like if you want to be uh, primary school or elementary school, excuse me, then that probably doesn't matter there. But once you start teaching substance and stuff, I think it's important to do that. But then, mostly it was it was distance learning that really was my sweet spot. Like the ability to be able to take the material on my own and then absorb it, go through it, come back to a group setting and have a conversation about it. I think that was the thing that really benefited me the most. And I know not everybody learns the same way, but that was what really did it for me. I mean, my my GPA in high school is like probably a mid to low C, and I my throughout all 8 years of college, it was like a 3.97. You know what I mean? It was like it was markedly different because I had more latitude in what I was going to do. But that's part of it too. Obviously, aside from the stupid shit that undergrad make you do all these elective classes, you're studying stuff that you care about, you want to learn. You know what I mean? So it's quite a bit different. But I think that's part of it too. Like my question for you as somebody who's working in this, again, large size classrooms make it difficult at best to meet the unique needs of children, right? But it's not just about needs. It's about like how do we turn this young person into somebody who's competent and confident and a decision maker who's choosing their own path. I mean, it's you don't have to go to 2 or 4 or 8 years of school to do most jobs, frankly. For some reason, one great thing that Trump admin did was cut that 4 year bachelor's requirement off federal jobs. That it's just completely unnecessary, right? You don't need a 4 year degree to do most stuff, but you don't need most of that stuff to do most jobs. Some people do, right? And the earlier you can determine that and start preparing yourself for it, the better. But the earlier you can determine you don't need it, the better as well, right? So you can get yourself into different types of stuff. I don't know how old you are, but when you and I were going through high school, the career centers were a big thing, right? At least in the South where I grew up, it was a big thing. If you were thinking about being a welder or mechanic or something like that, you could pop into that your sophomore year or junior year of high school. Now I don't know so much, right?
Yeah, no, it's coming back. I mean, this is where I was asking, and I asked this question of a lot of people, like, where did you learn the most, and what was that? Because we have decided that the purpose of education, both culturally and the way that we write it in statute, the purpose is to help people read, write, and do math, essentially. And when people talk about like, how are we doing? They're like, well, the 12th grade reading scores are da 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 da, right? Like it's culturally ingrained into us. But if you do never let your learning get or your education get in the way of your learning,
Mm.
and you back that truck up and say like, what is the role of education in my life? It's not to spend 12 years in a box
Mm.
and come out be able to regurgitate facts, right? Learning is something we do our entire lives. We have to be
Mm.
successful at anything. And when I ask people like, where did the most transformational learning experience happen? It almost never happens inside the four walls of an
Sure.
institution for the reasons you just said. It doesn't strike my passions. It doesn't hit my learning styles. There's all sorts of things, and also that a lot of the learning experience you just have to have by doing. So, in my own life, I think like football was transformational for me. I thought I was a pretty big guy until I stood across a guy who was 6'5", 350 pounds, and that guy ate my lunch every day at practice. And eventually I got tired of getting hit in the face and knocked on my keister. And I started to learn, like, if I'm going to win, I better outthink him. I better be 4 steps ahead of him. That skill set, I then found chess was a very similar niche, right? Helped me do that. Then it became lobbying. And all that same skill set has really allowed me to get set up for success throughout life, which I can take back and attribute to that challenging moment. Or I can think, I told you I did my mission in North Carolina as a Mormon. You knock on doors, you're like, hey, would you like to join a religion in Utah? 99 out of 100 people are going to say, get the F out of here and slam the door in your face. That's actually super helpful for learning. You get really good at dealing with rejection. And the people who do open your door, I said I was stationed just outside of Bragg. I was outside of Cherry Point. Kids who were 18, 19, 20 years old who were coming back from a war theater who have real life problems. Their girlfriend or wife has left them. Their buddy got shot. They got injured. They have PTSD. And they're looking to you for spiritual guidance, and you're 19.
Yeah.
Right? Like those are the moments when you learn about yourself, you learn about the world, you develop the skills that can go out there. That's not to diminish the basic skills that we need, but it's to say that if we're trying to actually help people learn and be prepared to be successful adults, you can't think about it as some commoditized, time-bound thing that we do. We have to think about learning in an entirely different way. And that's where school choice is a great mechanism to help us get there, but it's certainly not the end game. It's just one step towards a complete cultural shift that we need to make to value learning over the institutionalization
That's
of it.
right. Yeah. And then, at some point, once they gain enough traction, you have to find methodology that works, and you have to find scalability for that methodology. That's kind of the progress for any business, though, to be fair. I remember in certain college situations, you'll have not a proctored, or not proctor, what's the word for it? A class where you just sit in or whatever. But there was like professors for certain things would give like a 30 or 45-minute lecture on what the class is about. You attend, and then you decide if you're going to sign up for that class, right? To be honest, I don't see why this can't start in high school. I don't understand. And if not enough people sign up for that class, the class doesn't happen because you didn't do a good job as an educator. I mean, like if you have to create an incentive structure, and an incentive structure, by the way, means there's going to be winners and losers because that's how fucking life works. But if we don't create an incentive structure to get the most out of people, then you get drones. You just get people who check enough boxes to stay alive, and that's not enough for Americans. It's just not enough for us, man. This is something that it's something that drives me nuts, to be honest. That we don't treat it like a marketplace. And it isn't like the tired like Republican privatize everything. I don't care if it's privatized or not. If people are getting fired for incompetence, I don't give a shit who's running it, frankly. And if the best ideas are getting promoted, I don't care about who's running it either. That's the if you just focus on that part, then what you'll get is something on the private side that looks like No Child Left Behind, where people are just teaching to standardized testing, right? Whether it's public or private. If you tie funding, even if school choice were the standard, right? School choice is the standard, but any kind of outside funding is based on standardized test scores, and they will do the exact same thing that the public schools are doing right now. Nothing will ever change.
Exactly. Yeah, the nerds in the space call it equifinality. It's actually a design choice they make, which is, if you get rid of the glossy word, they're basically saying everyone needs to start in the same place and end in the same place and have a whole bunch of pathways to get from here to there. I think that's structurally the wrong thing to think about. So, in education terms, they're saying, I don't care if you go to public, private, charter, whatever, you just have to end up in the same place with the same standardized test score and the same outcome. This is America. We don't believe in equifinality. We believe in pluralism. Like, we believe in different outcomes. And so if you want to end up being a welder or you want to work with your hands, more power to you, right? If somebody else wants to be an academic and go in that, great. We want a different way of people being able to self-determine their lives and have different pathways to get there. That's the right design choice.
Yeah. So how do you get there? I mean, I guess dealing with these behemoth government organizations is never going to be easy. Getting people to change. I mean, like, the first thing you have to do is get stakeholder buy-in. Like parents have to care. They have to know that the option exists, and they have to want that option. That's the first step, right? That's the top of funnel marketing device. But then after that, how do you even execute on any of this stuff?
Yeah, let me give you a market-based answer, give you a policy-based answer, and you can cut me off anywhere in between. But I like the way economists talk about innovation because the way that they'll describe human progress getting better is through a process of bundling and unbundling. So you could think about this like music. When you and I were kids, we had like cassette tapes, and you might have one track or on an 8 track, right? One song on there. And then we get tired of buying, each track for $1 each. That was super annoying. Somebody comes out with a CD and starts to bundle 15 tracks together. So now you pay a little more, but you get more stuff. The nice thing about that is you get more stuff. The downside of that is you get 12 tracks you hate and never wanted to listen to. So then somebody else is like, look, I've created the iPod Shuffle. And you go back to buying an unbundled product for $1 again. You're like, this is awesome. I can get the benefits of a bundled product, but I can do it by buying unbundled. You're like, this is great. And then we're like, but this is annoying. I'm spending so much money buying tracks. So here comes Apple Music and Spotify. You just go through these cycles of bundling and unbundling. And what happens in those cycles is human lives get improved because the service gets better over and over again. Part of what happened in education, in my view, is we bundled it together. So when we say education, we don't just mean academics. You think about the products and services a school has. It has lunch programs. It has athletic programs. It has career consulting. It has all these things. And we've just bundled them together into one package we call school, and we offer that to people. Well, if you imagine like what's going to get us out of this into a more innovative future, it's going to come through a process of unbundling and rebundling. So people are going to say, I can't solve the whole school problem, but I can solve the math problem. So you can imagine that's already happening. I don't think people appreciate how much that's happening, but like Koman is a math tutoring center. They're crushing it. They've got more physical locations in the world than there are Starbucks locations. Like people don't understand how big that math market has gotten because school, the bundled product, is not good at teaching math. But these unbundled products, Russian Math School, Koman, whatever, they're awesome at it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Athletics. We all know if our kids are any good at athletics, I'm going to put them in AAU basketball or club soccer or club baseball. Those markets are already way bigger than what's in the bundled product. What needs to happen, though, is the unbundling happens. That's going to get to be annoying for consumers. People are going to have to rebundle it into new ideas of what school look like. And those schools are going to be awesome. And that's already happening. People are calling them micro schools and pods and hybrid homeschools. And there's all this nomenclature around it. But that's functionally what's happening is people are taking the best of these cool new models and they're packaging them together to make it really easy for a parent and convenient. The more that cycle can happen, the more we'll innovate. And I'll stop there before I give you policy answers.
Well, no, I mean, the other obvious example of that is cable television, right?
100%.
We went from cable to streaming and now back to bundled streaming again for the exact same reason, because people were paying $200 a month for cable and then they were paying $300 a month for 17 different fucking streaming services. But it's true. People whine about the price. Fair enough, but you're getting so much more than you ever were before. And it's on demand now, which is the improvement part, right? So just the market figured out that even if you have a bunch of stuff people don't want, if you have all the stuff they do and it's on demand, they won't give a shit about all the stuff they don't want, which is true. People pay for that stuff right now. So how do you do that from a policy perspective? How do you basically what you're doing is you're breaking up the monopoly on education, right? And you're giving it back to people who are actually good at the individual pieces. But at some point, there does have to be some continuity between those pieces, right? Like you've got to have a checklist. You have to get all these things. It doesn't matter where you get them from, but you got to get all these things. Now, we have other situations like that. If you've been in higher education, you can get credits here, credits there, certifications here, certifications there, bundle them together, and then take a fucking MCAT, go to med school, or take whatever whatever the GM, whatever what is it, for the master's program, whatever the fuck it is,
GMAT or whatever.
GMAT, yeah. You take that, but it's like you've got credits and certifications or whatever qualifications from a bunch of different places. You bundle them in one thing, and you get onto the new thing. That's definitely a possibility, right? Just a matter of how to get it done politically.
That's it. And this is where, I mean, just to beg it in, you talked about like this is a monopoly and it just gets more money at it. I don't know that Americans appreciate how much of an outlier we are in that,
Mm,
where, in the early days of public education, most of the rest of the world, to the degree they had public education, said, hey, we're going to fund public education, but we're going to let the families go pick whatever option's best for them. Americans did it different. We said, we're going to tell you exactly what option you must go to, and we're not going to let you have freedom to get out of that. The result of that is just massive cost inflation.
mm.
So the national average right now is we spend about $20,000 per kid per year on public schools.
I'm sorry, how
Some
much?
places, $20,000. And if you look at places like New York City, where they've had 100,000 kids bail out of the public school system, it's up to $45,000 a kid. You can go to upstate New York and you don't have to shoot very far before you find districts with $100,000 per kid per year in spending. There's some serious money being hemorrhaged. And so when people are like, I just need more money, I keep saying, is it the $100,000 district? Is it the $40,000 district? Like, you show me the model. I think the evidence is pretty clear. You can throw all the money you want at this, it's not going to fix it. But look, once you throw that kind of money into a system, there's a lot of people at the table eating off of that. And so politically, that makes it impossibly hard to unwind because the people who want to innovate and unwind don't make as much money as the people who are eating off of it. And so
Mm,
you've got to flip that around a little bit. So part of the idea is the original idea was, hey, we're going to have charter schools where we have public schools, but they're run by outside people. Fine, that's been fairly successful, reasonably successful. These education savings accounts are saying, like, instead of taking $20,000, why don't I leave the public school with 10,000? I'll give 10,000 to the parents, and they can go out and they can buy from approved expenses. So the government's going to decide what you can buy, but you can pick between whatever 100 or 1,000 different options.
mm.
The bet with that is you're going to start getting better market behavior
Yeah.
as customers start to re-engage and culturally think about things, and so they can go out and buy those unbundled products. They can buy the bundled products, and that market dynamism allows a transition period that is more productive than you would have by just trying to switch all at once. And so you got states like Florida that have 500,000 kids on the ESA there. Texas just opened
Yeah.
2 weeks ago. They got 160,000 kids signed
Mm.
up. Arizona's got 110,000 kids. Like, this is happening at breathtaking speed. These programs have only existed usually for a handful of years. So that transition is going to be good, but it's not sufficient because the government's still deciding what people can buy. There's going to be additional waves, right? There's personal tax credits in states like
Mm.
Oklahoma and Idaho that are just saying, here, just have $5,000 back. Like, I'll just give you your cash back. Go buy what you want. Programs like that might even allow more experimental, more unbundled, more bundled buying. And, like anything else, if you're a consumer and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe what my neighbor's kid is doing to learn math, you're going to want to go buy that. That's just naturally what happens. And that's why, again, how do you get to the place where club baseball is more popular than high school baseball? Because club baseball is clearly so much better. I'm willing to go pay for it.
Yeah.
Right? I'll just walk over that. I don't need any of that. So that's already happening in the market, but these kind of ESA tax credit type programs are creating a transition opportunity to make that easier for everybody, to make it more equal for everybody, to make the move over there without just crushing the system that's there right now. So it's both politically more feasible, but it's also just a better market mechanism.
Yeah, let me ask you this, because I'm not familiar. We haven't really gotten into it yet because we're in a pretty good district. But with ESAs and school choice, I know this varies by state, but am I capable of doing a hybrid? Like, can I take a certain amount for and do buy a homeschool program? Like my buddy is a former high school teacher. He's doing his own homeschooling programs now, mostly for later, right? I don't know if he's doing elementary stuff yet, but am I able to do that plus spend some of the money on one of the math tutors or whatever, right? Because from my perspective is, not AFT, one of the big, what's the NEA? NEA did a study in Southern California in I think 2010. And I hate teachers unions just as much as everybody else because they're the worst people in the world. But they did a study across all races, both sexes, all classes, economically speaking. And the number one predictor of academic success was parental involvement. It was the only thing that actually made any difference at all, as a matter of fact, because there were plenty of rich kids that were stupid, not stupid, just lazy and disengaged. There were plenty of poor kids that were fucking great, right? The only thing they found that was actually useful was parental involvement. And parental involvement was just like leadership and guidance for the most part, right? Just like, here's what you should be doing, here's what you should be doing, take advantage of this. Identifying the strengths and weaknesses of your kid. If they need some help in something, obviously get them help, but not everybody needs to know physics. But if your kid is into physics, you got to get them somebody better than what's at the high school to teach them, for the most part, right? I mean, every now and again you'll run into somebody that's really good at it, but there's not a whole lot of Walter Whites out there and doing chemistry teaching. It's mostly just people that have a cursory understanding of chemistry, frankly, that are teaching that class. So, my question, I guess, is, can we get to a system where if I see potential in my kid in math, can I send him to one of these higher capability math programs, or whatever the capability is, right? Because that person's going to do way better for them. And I think the child is going to learn sometime between, let's say 13 and 16, that this is what I really want to do, right? And now I'm super prepared for it, right?
Welcome to the bowels of education nerddom. But this is the fight that the school choice movement is having with itself, which is, should those be allowable? So, a lot of the early states, like Florida, Arizona, and West Virginia, you can absolutely do that. You want to go to, again, whatever nerd squad, math or physics or biology or whatever you want to do, you want to buy that, you can do that 100%. Places like Texas are much more regulated. So they say you can only buy accredited providers. Now, granted, most of these kind of emerging models can figure out how to become accredited over time, but it costs money. It takes time, right? Like, it just makes the market less dynamic and less compelling. And so people like me think we ought to deregulate to be as open to innovation and new ideas as possible. There's certainly a lot of people who just say, like, hey, I don't have any risk tolerance at all for new things. And so unless it's, St. Mark's or something like that that's on lockdown, we don't want to do it. We're going to put that at law. And that's the debate we end up having with a lot of legislators is, how much new ideas, how much freedom, how much innovation are we willing to tolerate? As you can probably tell, I have a pretty clear opinion on where that ought to be, but practically, Texas is a good example. We're going to take the best deal we can get, make the most progress we can get, and then just keep making the case on why more freedom is the solution to the problems.
I mean, as it stands right now, I think you have like 10 credits a year or something like that, that are, let's say, elective, right? Something like that. I feel like you could probably use those. You know what I mean? I think for all of high school in Texas, it's 26 total for the 4 years of elective classes. Why is that such a narrow? I understand why it is, because you only have so many teachers that are able to teach so many classes. You have to have interest in something to get it taught. But that seems like, for the school choice people, a perfect opportunity to carve out, even if they just do it, and you don't have to set a sunset on it, but even if it's only a short-lived program, it will either prove or disprove the functionality of that system, right? Like, hey, talk to the Texas school where, like, hey, you guys have 26 credit, I think it's 26 credit requirement for electives. We want those 26 credits to be, they don't have to, but we want them to be capable of farming out to one of these other institutions, right? Let's do a 4-year test for a full body of class and see how they and their cohorts do. That seems like a pretty easy idea, to be honest.
You would think what ends up happening functionally is a lot of well-intended people come into the state legislature with big ideas, and they're trying to solve very practical problems. So they'll be like, Texas kids aren't proud enough of Texas. So we need to make sure that we don't just teach American history and world history. We need to make sure we teach Texas history. So let's mandate that for every high school kid. Fine. The next person comes along and is like, everyone's a moron when it comes to civics. Let's make sure we mandate civics. Okay, fine. All right, the next person comes in and like, man, these kids can't do math at all with their personal finances. We need to mandate personal finances. fine, right? You just go through this cycle over and over again before pretty soon you've got way more mandated courses than you have time or ability to execute any of them. And politically speaking, it's not like you're going to try to bounce the civics class out of there or the Texas history class, right? Like that's a political no winning proposition there. So that's part of the reason why it's really hard to get more freedom injected into the current public school system. And where, a lot of these parents are just getting frustrated, and when they want certain types of things taught, they're just leaving. And so you see that not just in the number of people who are just straight up opting out of school entirely and going to homeschool, which is at an all-time high, but even if you look at things like truancy, it's at an all-time high and it's been in there for a long time. Like people just stop showing up. And it doesn't matter that by law, the government's threatening to throw parents in jail for being truant or just disappearing. Americans just don't care, right? Like if you're not providing value, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what's happening. So I'm with you. I think there's a huge market or huge opportunity to create more freedom. I can tell you one idea that's starting to percolate, and I think you're gonna see this in the next year or two in one of these states, is people are basically saying, yes, every kid needs to learn how to read, write, and do math. That's compelling, but we don't need to do that with 18-year-olds. Like that, you ought to be done with that by the time you're 12. So let's just collapse the expectations down and say by the time you're 12, you better learn how to do those fundamental skills. And then from that period until you turn 18, right now, we're still teaching you those basic requirements. Then we drop you at 18. We're like, best of effing luck. I hope you learn how to get a job.
Isn't it weird? Like for some reason, we know you have the kid from K to 12. So you take this functional skill and you stretch it out over that whole time. Why? Like you should be reading, like, not that this isn't the case, but you should be doing it, like you should be writing research papers by the time you're in high school, not reading Hamlet for the first time. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, no, and that's where we just tried to say, like, we need to raise the bar of that basic proficiency and then say, okay, once you've met that basic proficiency, at that point, as a high schooler, we should make basically all of your classes elective. You should start making decisions. And if you want to start going to work, you want to get an internship, you want to work part-time, you want to start taking college classes, like, it's time to be a grown-up. It's time to start making decisions on your own and dealing with the consequences while you're still living at home. You still have a safety net. You still have some public funding to help you choose those options. And that way, when you're 18, you should already know what your passions are, what your skills are, how you can use those passions and skills to go out and actually create money in the world and value for other people so you can sustain yourself and be a functional, productive human being. So I think you're going to see a law like that pass in a state sometime pretty soon. And that idea pulls through the roof. It's like 90%.
Yeah.
This is more popular than any idea I've worked on in a long time.
I mean, it seems very obvious to me, and anybody that has been engaged with children, whether it's your own or your work with them, you should have figured out by now that the more weight you put on them, the better they do. It's just not true that you have to coddle children. I don't know where this stupid shit came from, but being part of raising two little boys, it's like the more responsibility I put on them, the better they become, right? And not just the functionality of them as a human being better, but they're better people and they feel better about themselves. You know what I mean? Treating people like they're incompetent, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? They become dependent and incompetent as a result of that shit. I just don't understand where this. I mean, I guess I do. It's probably was intentional to some degree, but let's talk
the Jonathan Haidt stuff, right?
Yeah,
like we're coddling American minds. We're not allowing people to suffer from adversity. And yet we all know from not just our anecdotal experience, but even from like neuroplasticity studies, like if you're not running into adversity, if you're not doing hard things, if you're not experiencing uncomfortable consequences, you're actually not learning in a really true mechanical, your brain's not developing way.
Right.
It's the way the system's designed right now is insane. And we should all know it and have a strong desire to change. And clearly we do if we're at 90%. Like I think we're all there. We just need to do it.
Yeah. So let's talk about Yes Every Kid. What is it specifically that you guys do?
We're mostly a team of lobbyists. We've got lobbyists, lawyers, and departmental staff. And so, what we will do is sit here and say, like, what's the ideal environment that we would like to have? If parents were actually in charge of making decisions in law the way they should be in nature, and then let's go out and do a lot of polling and understand how much is the public with us. So, like this high school example we just went through is a great one, where we know the public's like, yes, that makes sense. Great. It may not be all the way to the things we want to do, but it's so obvious to so many people. And, what I'm saying might be obvious, but in statutes, we're talking about taking out hundreds and thousands of pages of statutes to enable that. That's really hard. So you need a team of lawyers and policy wonks who can sit there and get really concrete. Okay, great. In line 7 of clause 8, we need to take out these words.
Sure.
So there's that kind of mechanics to it. And then there's the actual lobbying where somebody has to sit down with legislators and say, hey, here's the big idea. Here's why it's in your self-interest. How can we be helpful? And try to work through that. And then once a law gets passed, most people think of the legislature as doing the work. That's obviously not what happens. Mechanically, you have an executive branch that gets handed a law, and 99 times out of 100, that branch had no idea the law was coming. They have no idea what to do with it. And so they get handed a new edict and are told to radically change their lives. They just don't know how to do it. And that's why we have a lot of former departmental staff inside, is to actually sit down with them, catch them ahead of time before the law passes and say, hey, this is coming your way. And then once it's here, whether it's software, it's regulations, it's legal opinions, whatever you need, we'll actually help you do this in a productive way that meets legislative intent.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly I try to tell people this a lot because we don't have the how a bill becomes law cartoon anymore. I mean, it's still out there, but we just don't have it anymore. And people, as you say, kind of tongue in cheek, but people are kind of morons on civics. But the sign of a good law is clear, concise, and enforceable, right? Clear in that it's clear in what it applies to, concise, and that it only applies to that one thing, and enforceable, and there's actual teeth, right? That's what a good law looks like. And the problem is, and look, this Chevron decision was huge in this regard. People need to learn more about that. But the problem is we've had this like expert opinion doctrine for a long time, where unelected bureaucrats in the executive can just make up their own fucking laws, right? Despite what people want or what Congress actually legislated, which is completely unconstitutional. And it went on for a very, very long time. Luckily, it's kind of reversed now, but still that institutional rot is in there. And it takes I don't think people understand this. Lobbyists have a pretty bad reputation in this country for obvious reasons, but sometimes you need somebody on the ground that's a fucking pit bull that's chasing this thing down to the bitter end. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it just doesn't happen. People, something will be passed into law with a certain requirement, and these people in bureaucratic positions will find a way to do the least amount to satisfy that, right? Instead of fulfilling the intent of it. So yeah, it's just you need somebody to chase this stuff down. That's really what it is.
The politics of being in the legislature is you want to write a law as broad as you can, because then nobody can blame you. So if you're writing an environmental law, you're like, dear EPA, please clean the water, right? If I don't have to get into the minutia of how to clean the water, I don't have to make any trade-offs. Nobody's going to yell at me for passing the bill that says clean the water. If my bill says educate the kids, no problem. If it says give them money for education, no problem, right? The more glossy and high level I can write the law, the better from a politician's standpoint. From the department side, and then from the customer who actually gets the benefit or the harm, that's super hazardous. It's terrible because the department has to catch that, and the EPA has to say, what do you mean clean water? How? In what mechanism, right? And to your point, prior to the Chevron doctrine and prior to the RAINS Acts being passed in states, whether it was the EPA or it was the state agency, these agencies were just catching it, and they were just making up rules on the fly that nobody ever voted for. And you were just getting insane decisions. And so, Yes, the Supreme Court has basically said if you're in Congress, you can't just punt decisions to the,
Mm,
the executive agency. You actually have to have real laws that are enforceable. And if the agency tries to make real laws that you haven't voted on, it needs to come back to you. We'll see how that plays out in practice. Congress is really good at sidestepping responsibility,
mm,
but hopefully the courts continue to push it back and force them to do their job. And the same thing's happening at states. States are starting to pass what they call REINS Acts, which are meant to do the same thing. It's
yeah,
there to force state agencies to actually go to the legislature and say, I think what you meant was this. Is it or not? And
yeah,
make the legislature take the harder votes.
yeah. So we're in a legislative session right now, but we're also coming up on midterms. Um, what states do you see as the next frontiers for universal education choice, and what do you think that looks like? I mean, AI is becoming a big thing. Obviously, I don't think that should be heavily involved because it's wrong most of the time, to be honest. You can train it to be wrong. That's an issue. You know what I mean? Like if somebody posts something incorrectly on a website somewhere, people can flag it as incorrect. But if it's AI's learning, then it's and we one of the things we learned recently is that after you get 7 questions deep, 7 layers deep with every single AI platform, it doesn't matter which one it is, it starts to forget what the fuck you're talking about. It also gets stuck on early assumptions. So if you're not very clear up front and it makes a bad assumption, it'll fold that assumption into every decision it makes moving forward. There's a lot of problems with that. So I'm not trying to have robots train our people just yet. We'll see, maybe in the future. But what do you see as far as like any kind of new modalities of education and what states are, I guess, at the tip of the spear on some of this stuff?
I think AI is a good example of unbundling in a lot of
Mm,
ways, right? You're getting all these one-off products like Khan Academy is a great example. Millions and millions of people have used Khan to learn math on YouTube, but now they're doing it with an AI chat interface called Khanmigo. That's help again. If you can't afford to go to Kumon or Mathnasium or one of these tutoring centers, you can get it for free on Khan. And then what you're seeing is it's AI starting to be rebundled back into other products.
mm,
So I suspect one of the models I'm most curious to watch play out in Texas is it's called the Texas Sports Academy, and basically they're taking AI and trying to use it to help people learn those basic skills, reading, writing, math, in 2 hours a day or less. And then they're saying the rest of the day, you're going to be able to go play sports. So they're saying, like, I'm going to pair that AI learning with things you actually want to do. You want to go be a baseball player? I'm going to send you to the baseball school. I suspect the market for that, particularly in Texas, is going to be massive, but
mm.
it's a good example of like rebundling this AI thing with things that already exist that are super compelling in the market. So two unbundled products now become bundled. I
Yeah.
think will take a lot of market share over time.
Mm,
So to your answer on states, like Texas was the great white whale. It's got 5.5 million kids in the state just by itself. So you're talking 10% of the U.S. population of K-12 kids are here. Again, 160,000 and counting signing up. Like I think Texas is it's only got $1 billion only. It's that's small by Texas standards.
mm.
Over time, you're going to see that budget grow and the number of kids in this program grow, and so Texas will be a bellwether. But you know, states like Florida growing remarkably fast, Arizona, others, and you'll see this next generation of policies kick in too, like the high school concept we kicked in. I'll bet in the next 5 years we'll come back to states like Florida, Arizona, Texas. These tax credits will come back in, and so my bet is you're going to probably see the same 25 states that have done charter schools be the same 25 states that will do ESAs, be the
Mm.
same 25 states that will do that. And eventually we'll see, you know, when Arizona suddenly has killer world-class education for $5,000 a kid, and California has a one option or bust at 25 or $30,000 a kid. Will that be enough pressure to crack a California? Maybe. I don't know.
Mm.
And then there's this, we haven't even talked about the fact that there's 529 accounts are doubled up
Mm.
federally. There's this new Trump account, the 530As. There's a federal tax credit scholarship where people can get $1,700 off their federal income tax to give scholarships to kids. There's just tons of programs going on everywhere that's just going to accelerate this. So, you know, unless you're in a deep blue state, you're probably going to see some kind of innovation somewhere in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about bundling, unbundling. I think and this is my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like, especially prior to high school, the bundled product that would be most difficult to deal with is the fact that a lot of public education is just childcare at this point, right? It's like from 8 to 3, I know where my kid is and I can go to work.
Yep.
I have no idea how to solve for that, frankly, because we're probably not going to. I say regress, and I don't mean it that way, but that's just the word I'm using. We're probably not going to go back to single income households. That's probably not a thing, right, for most people. So from 8 to 3, my kid's got to be somewhere. You know what I mean? So there's got to be like, if they're going to 3 different things during the day, somebody's got to drive them. You know what I mean? And if not enough people are doing something, how do you solve for that? I don't know the answer to these questions.
They're legitimate questions, and you're right. When you think about the bundle that's there today, childcare is a huge service in the bundle that people are trying to buy, and I don't think that's going to stop. I do think you can look at the 0 to 5-year-old space, what they call pre-K space, for some hints, where a surprising number of people now keep their kids at home. One of the trends people don't appreciate is Americans are having kids way later in life than they used to. We used to have kids in our early 20s. Now most of us are having kids in our late 30s. Most of us have a lot more money than our parents had when they had us. And so they have a lot more flexibility. So there are a massive number of kids staying home relative to what we've ever had in U.S. history. And I suspect if we didn't force kids out of home, there would probably continue to be more at home. But even then, inside the pre-K space, like Montessori schools, you're in Texas, you drive around Austin, drive around Dallas, seems like there's one on every corner. There's more Montessori schools than there are Starbucks, I think. And that just kind of tells you, like, that is a marketplace of childcare, but it's also got kind of premier educational aspects to it. I think there's always going to be childcare plus or childcare with different unbundled elements that will be compelling to people. And you can even look again, states like Florida, they subsidize pre-K. But even then, I think it's only 50% of people that take the subsidy to send people around. So, again, I can't give you the answers of the future. I wish I had that crystal ball. But I think some of those factors would probably give you some hints about where it lives. I think the debates you hear in legislatures are, we've got to create more child care, and we've got to regulate it heavier to make sure that we only have child care facilities that fit this exact method and mold. As always, I think the solution there is wrong. It's not more top-down mandates. The solution is to give more people freedom, so make it easier for child care providers to start, to find buildings, to offer services, to staff those services, to do it at different hours, etc. I think the more freedom you give people, the better quality the product will be at a lower price.
Yeah, that's almost universally true. And if you provide something that's got that kind of value, people will find a way to make it work, frankly.
Yeah. Americans are awesome. We're really innovative.
Yeah.
We will, if we see a problem and there's not a barrier, some Yahoo will always find a way to fix it. They will come up with some innovative solution, and we're quick first adopters. If we see a better option, we will jump on it. We don't have a lot of respect for what's just historically been done. That's part of what makes us awesome, is we innovate like crazy people, and it's what makes our country amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Well, look, tell everybody where they can find you and find your organization so they can look into some of this stuff and stay up to date on the news, because, you guys are working in every state trying to get this stuff pushed.
Go on the website, go to yeseverykid.com. You can look us up on X or LinkedIn or whatever social media platform floats your boat. And if you go on the website, you can always send me an email. I'm pretty fast to respond to anyone.
Good. Well, look, thanks for coming today. If you have any other advice or anything for people before we get out of here, give it to them.
Oh, I think, as we said at the onset, ultimately, America's the greatest place on the planet. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we have natural rights. And with those rights comes responsibility. And there's perhaps no greater responsibility in this life than that of raising your children. So you're responsible for the education of your children. People like us are going to fight for those rights. We're going to try to make sure you're empowered to go do it. And ultimately, if you take that responsibility seriously, that's what's going to make the country a better place.
That's right.
So we want to help you.
Good. Well, I appreciate the work you do. Thanks for coming today. Appreciate the time.
First, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. And everybody go check out Yes Every Kid. Andrew Clark is the president of that organization. Get involved in your children's education because, it seems like it might matter. Thank you for listening. This has been Citizen.